Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mixing Your Reality. This is the MRVR Developer Showcase. My name is Kimberly Unger. I am a content sourcing lead and the holder of the mixed reality strategy for our fresh new Oculus publishing label. Woohoo, we're official. Today I'm here to moderate a showcase of developers who are mixing up their reality and they're expanding from straight up VR into MR. Which is, before several months ago, there was not really MR. You had AR and you had VR, and MR is kind of where the Venn diagram comes together in the middle. And we're seeing developers from both sides. We're seeing AR developers come add VR stylings, and we're seeing VR developers come and add AR stylings to get this new version of reality that, they're officially calling meta reality, but really is mixed reality for those of you who are in the game dev biz. Now, these teams are all established VR devs. They all have stuff that shipped to the store. If you do not know who they are, you should. Please go take a look at their stuff. I'll throw up some QR codes at the very end so you can take a look. And if you don't know what MR is or what our hot off the keyboard APIs look like, stick around for the Presence Platform panel that's going to be a little bit later this afternoon. That I think is 3:30 in this room. And they're going to lay out all of the new hotness for you guys and tell you where you can get access to the APIs that are coming down the line. So super quick, just to frame everything up for you. VR has been around for a bit. It's driving revenue for our developers. The hardware just keeps getting better, and it's about to get a shiny new pair of big kid sneakers. But in contrast, MR is just getting started. We're going back to ground zero. But look, the second kid always learns from the first, and the two of them are going to be asking a lot of new questions together. And these questions on the differences between VR and MR in some cases are bringing us back to some very fundamental design questions. Which seem to have edited themselves out of my slide. There we go. Okay, so things like, how do you take the design learnings from virtual reality and push them into the real world, right? So that you can integrate your UX or your UI with the things somebody may have in their real life environment. Or gravity, or physics. Like, how does gravity stop working when you suddenly have to deal with physics that have to encounter the real world? Right? How do you account for a game that maybe fanoodles the numbers to get a great feel in VR, but then you bring it into the real world and all of a sudden you have to deal with things like real world distances and real world objects. And then of course, the next one is my favorite current recurring question as we get from VR deeply into VR and we start thinking about things like locomotion and social interactions in the metaverse. What's up with my legs? But stay tuned, that one's coming probably a little bit later in the year. And, and there's always answers to all of these things. Sometimes they're good answers. Sometimes they're things like, hey, I smashed this pot and I get a rupee, I get a jewel. Sometimes they're bad answers. They're things like, I smashed this pot and oh my God, get the super glue. Mom is coming home in 5 minutes. But there's always answers. And as game developers and designers and engineers of all kinds, our job is to not only figure those out, but we're working to build the commonly understood library of game mechanics that everybody can work with going forward. That foundational library of interactions is going to give rise to the next evolution of game design. And so a clever gimmick, right, say a grappling hook in a first-person shooter 25 years ago, will become the kind of fundamental art that all games in a category or a class are going to draw on. And those are some of the things that these teams are working on right now. The work they're doing for mixed reality is going to serve as the foundation and is going to be art that every design team starts to take a look at from here on out. So, without further ado, let's see who we've got here. We've got Therese from Moon Mode. We've got, is it Jaime or Jamie? Jaime from Otters Lab. We've got Thomas from Thomas Van Bo. And we've got Samantha from Tender Claus here at the end. And all three of these studios have apps live on platform. Go check them out on your Quest. And let's kick this off. So first up, let's talk to Moon Mode. Therese, would you like me to just hit the button or would you like to come up here and...
You just hit the button.
I'll just hit the button. Yeah. All right, perfect. So let's get the mics turned on over here, please. All right, so Moon Mode is a small, most of the time, 3-person VR studio. They've been in the game since 2013, and they are on a mission to prove that VR doesn't have to be niche, complicated or uncomfortable. And I think, as we've all seen, these are problems that we've been solving for the past 10 years, and we're finally coming out of the woods. So let me kick this off. Moon mode.
Honestly, she's earned that nap.
Hello? Is anyone here?
You caused this whole mess. Now you need to help me out. Find those invitations and get them to the Hatter in the Keep of Hearts.
Follow me. Oh, a narrow passage. I love these.
That is Steve, bravest of the Butterfly Lords.
Okay, I fix.
You look lost.
All right, there we go. All right, these slides are in here so I don't go fangirling and forget I'm supposed to be a grown-ass adult up here and actually doing the panel. So we'll start with moon mode. First question. If you could go back in time, what would you tell the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed younger you, something you'd wish you'd known at the beginning of working with VR and MR? What's the one thing you wish you knew?
We first started out 8 years ago. So back then it was obviously only VR, not a lot of MR to talk about. But I think one thing that we've tried to follow for a long time is comfort first, which is, of course, there's as many players as there are hopefully eventually developers, and everyone has different preferences for comfort and for how easily they get sick or not sick. But when we started out, there was not a lot of games that were less extreme. And that's something that we wanted to do, was to focus on that, because I was trying to show my family, this is what, people in my industry do. And they were just oh my God, there's zombies everywhere and freaking out, So I feel sticking to your guts in a way that if you are a tolerant player or a tolerant player yourself and a developer that, can take that, then stick to that. But if not, then, follow your gut and let's make as many games as there are players that, Also neck health, having a huge headset on your head for a lot of the time and you're propping it up like this and you're sitting and you're doing this, it's gonna affect your neck. So do some stretching and be aware of that. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, I think from early on, I wanted to playtest my games a lot to get feedback and make them better. But one thing I would say to myself back then is to try to seek out playtesting with people outside of the game sphere. Like, it's a great place to get started because everybody's enthusiastic about the same things that you're building. But testing with people who are not gamers or who have never done VR is the most valuable testing you can do, because they're people who don't understand how to like hold a controller or like aren't that familiar with the medium. And if you're trying to make something that's very accessible to people and makes for like a good first-time experience, you need that feedback, and you will see things that you will not have seen when you play tested with other developers. So I would have definitely tried to seek out that sort of playtesting more. Yeah.
Perfect. Jaime?
So one of the things that we have learned a lot by force is whenever taking a concept that exists and works in real life or other mediums, whenever taking it to VR, making sure that you're not only translating it and taking into account the limitations of VR, but doing it the other way around, which is what is like take the size and the capabilities that VR offer and including that into a working or existing and already working concept instead of the other way around.
Samantha, your turn. Let's look at MR, since I know you guys are doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, so for MR, I think it's a similar, I think for us, at least for VR and MR, I had actually been working in VR since 2002 and some MR in like early research labs. And at that point, actually, the thing that I would say is it was easy to get discouraged over so many years, but to kind of, if you find something interesting, to kind of stick with it, because there's cycles of things that come around, and like they're developing, technology is developing and getting more and more like intuitive and also more and more accessible. And the thing for MR that I'd say, which is also relevant to VR for practical advice, is to always build in R&D time, especially if you're a studio working on the edge of emerging media. You kind of want to like have that time to discover and prototype what feels good and what works for you, and then double that time that you think you're going to need.
Sounds perfect. All right, Jaime, I'm going to call you up here to run through your slides next. This is Otters Lab. They're the crazy talented team behind O-Shape Chess Club and Les Mills Body Combat. He's come here all the way from Spain, so take it away. Just push the button.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Gonna push right here.
A little arrow. There you go.
Okay, so real quick about Otters Lab. The name Otter is we love creating other realities where possibilities and basically exploiting what VR possibilities bring. That is what made us create the first game in the middle that is O-Shape, then Chess Club here in the right, and Les Mills Body Combat in the left. And I want to tell a bit the story very quickly of how we took the concept of Les Mills Body Combat, which is a fitness guided class by a huge fitness company, and we took that concept into VR with this video, which is coming after this. There you go. Is it this one? Yes.
Only ever going higher. Offer a dozen of my desires. I keep it running, I never tire. Can't be distracted, baby, I'm wired. I keep it 140 drop. Boy, I'm not starting, it's just a crowd. I put the work in, I get the job. Trust me, it's different up at the top. Only as long as you keep it 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100.
So just as a quick introduction, that is what Les Mills does in real life. Body Combat is one of the programs that they had. And from there, we took it into VR. And luckily, we had the success on the first year, being named the best app of 2022 on the Quest Store. And we faced many challenges, which we will discuss here, but basically adapting all the moves from the real life Body Combat into VR with things like knees, kicks, elbows, and things like that. And there were many factors that we had to take into account, such as balance, tracking, and surroundings. And in terms of MR, this is what we are studying and researching now on how to bring the trainers into your real space to create a deeper connection with your trainers right at home, and also allowing for more moves that enhance also the balance, such as kicks. That is going to be something super tricky in VR, but MR is going to allow for that. So that would be it. Thank you.
All right, so sort of drafting off what you were showing us there, Jaime. So, in VR, you have total control, right? And in particular with the app you're designing, you control the environment, you control what players see, what they hear, not always what they smell, but that's an entirely different add-on. So what design challenges are you starting to notice in terms of designing for an environment that is different for every single player?
Yeah. So there's many challenges there, especially when you have targets coming at you. Depth is one of the things that not everyone at home. It's already hard to have 2 or 3 meters wide. So imagine if we're talking that the targets in our game come from 10, 15 meters away. So that is something that if your wall is 2 meters in front of you, that is super challenging. So we're tweaking a lot with the speed, and maybe instead of coming with depth, they are changing in size when coming at you. So that is one of the biggest challenges that we have. And also particularly when painting those targets and objects that come at you with obstacles that you have at home. So that's why, for example, some technology such as creating a portal is helping a lot with adapting to any room in the world.
Perfect. All right, sorry, Samantha, I'm going to hit you up next because I know you guys were working in AR for quite a while before you came over into VR in the first place. So when it comes to like moving into MR, what are you guys foreseeing as some of the challenges with working with those individualized living spaces?
Thanks. Yeah, that's actually a really good question because as you'll see, there's going to be a trailer of a project called Tendar, which was a AR virtual pet fish, which feasted on your tears, that turns your emotions into fish food, and was grew as a pet over a few months. And that was using a lot of object detection, and the context of that is that it was meant to be very intimate about your space. And I think that is maybe what we're all touching on in MR, is the difference between designing for a generic space and designing for an intimate space that is your space. That is why have mixed reality and pass-throughs to be about your world as well. So there are some challenges in that in terms of occlusion that can be applied across all different room sizes to marking even different furniture and objects in the room, and how do you create something that feels compelling and unique to you but also can be generally applied.
Perfect. All right, I am going to bump us along a little bit because we only have 30 minutes in here. So Thomas, you are up next. Let's hop over. So Thomas is a one-man studio. The man has never met an API he didn't like. He is one of our top developers on the platform. He's the developer of Cubism, which we'll show you in just a second. And come on up.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey all, so can I play the video? Is it, yeah, and then... One more time, that just started. All right, hey, so my name is Thomas. I made a puzzle game called Cubism, which launched back in 2020. And it's this very simple game about putting blocks into shapes. But because it was a very simple game, it was also a really fun playground to experiment with all the cool new APIs that were coming out for Quest. So over the years, I had updates that added hand tracking support and pass-through support, which you can see here. And there's still updates that are in the works. So in this video, for example, you can see the scene API support, where you can sort of snap a puzzle onto a table. And the idea is that then it would persist. So kind of like you would have a Rubik's Cube on your desk that you can get back to do a quick puzzle. That's the idea there. So obviously, this was added to Cubism, but I really wanted to work on something that was native to mixed reality and that really showed what you could do with room scale mixed reality. So I'm working on a new game called Laser Dance, and the idea is that you can turn any room of your house into a laser obstacle course. So yeah, you set up your walls, you set up your furniture, but then you also calibrate these 2 virtual buttons, which you'll see in just a second, onto the opposite walls of your room. And then the idea is that you basically go back and forth between the buttons, and each time you press them, this parametric pattern of lasers appears, and you have to move your whole body through it. So it's this very physical, game that kind of looks like a dance when you're just observing it, and that's why it's called Laser Dance. So these patterns are sort of adapting to the room size and layout. If you have furniture, then the laser patterns will try to go around it. And depending on the patterns, you'll have to move in very different ways, like you're dodging, you're dancing, and then sometimes you're sort of boot camp crawling on the floor, which is always the most fun to see. Yeah, and so the idea is to try to make that fun and accessible to as many people as possible, to as many spaces as possible. So that's in the works.
So, super quick question. I'm going to start with you, Thomas. So, developing for different room spaces is one thing, but what about developing for different people spaces? Like people are different sizes, different ages, different levels of mobility. How do you take that into account when you're building for MR and for VR?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for sure, especially for Laser Dance, which is like inherently a very physical game. But when it comes to mixed reality and when it comes to room scale mixed reality like this, I'm definitely spending a lot of time building tools to make sure that I can emulate different situations for different rooms. I have a system to like emulate different rooms and sort of have these side by side as I'm designing the laser patterns to make sure, okay, what does it look like in a small room, in a big room, in a room with a lot of furniture, with no furniture, like a narrow hallway in a wide space. And so I can tweak all these parameters and sort of spawn a bunch of rooms next to each other to like directly compare this. And I also have parameters for body types and mobility limitations. And so the ideal is to try to make all these patterns as accessible as possible there as well. So there's things like variables for the player height or their shoulder width, but then also essentially like how low can they go? Like not everybody can boot camp crawl on the floor, obviously. So the idea is since everything is already parametric, like it just adds a few more parameters that tries to adapt the patterns in that sense to try and make it as accessible as possible. It's the goal. I know it will be hard for Laser Dance because it's by its nature a physical game, but it'd be definitely fun to try to get as many people into that as possible and to get as many people comfortable doing these types of boot camp things as possible too. So
sounds perfect. Yeah. Therese, how about designing for different kinds of players for things like Space Folk City?
So we actually found out quite early on that we have very wide spectrum of players. We have players who are like helping us debug, like coming in through virtual desktop through Steam into, but then we also have players who've never ever played VR before, never had any kind of game device. And we've been working a lot with our community and just listening to people and trying to adjust and test a lot. Test with different groups, get your parents, get your family, get your friends, people, try it out because it's a very, very wide group of people that are getting into VR. So I would just say test a lot, test a lot. Yeah.
Agreed.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to jump ahead to our final showcase. Samantha, do you want to come up here and talk over your video, or should I just push the button? Let me know what you...
Yeah, I think I can say a sentence and then you can push the button.
Sounds perfect.
We're a studio. We came out of a 20-year art practice with myself and my collaborator, and now we're a studio of 15. We work a lot on designing for the edges of emerging technology and the affordances of what they can provide the player, as well as what types of stories they could tell. So we have a lot of narrative experiences. The Games of the Future part of it is you'll see some of the AR stuff I mentioned before. And also we have a game that had live actors in the game as NPCs throughout the different times during COVID. So thanks.
Fantastic. All right, here we go.
Let's set the stage. Put on your headset. Imagine a ship at sea. The illusion of a storm, a tempest, a production sunk, a theater closed. But I, the actor, am live, ready to perform my role. Good Prospero will bring the play to life with the help of my magic and you, my spirits. We are ready now to perform together. Approach my Ariel. Come.